There we go. We're all online now. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can highlight me. Spotlight for everybody. So I hope you guys can see me, not everything else.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Good.
Nope, that's good.
Well, welcome to Goldenrod's online fly tying for February the 14th, Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So the first fly we're going to do today is Black Nose Dace. And that came out of this book. And that was predicated on the fact that Florin has been doing some bass chasing in Elk Lake and thinking that small minnow patterns might be something for us to have available for the fly tie. So I'll quickly go through the materials for what we've got for this pattern. The first thing is the hook is that I'm using today is a TMC 9395, which is basically a straight eye streamer hook, 3X long, and it's a fairly heavy hook. The pattern book says use a down eye hook, but I don't think it much matters. You're gonna tie this and run it with a riffle hitch anyway. So the first thing I've done is I've taken my flat blade pliers and I have mashed the barb down. And now we have no problems with the efficient wildlife guys if we get stopped. And I will stick that in the vise. And I'm going to use my rotary feature. So I want to make sure that the hook is in straight and that the bobbin rest is in a good spot so it doesn't get in the way. I'll move that out for the moment. The rest of the materials, the thread is a black 6/0. You could do it with 8/0 if you wanted to keep the bulk down a bit, but I find 6/0, it makes it a little easier to build the bulky head at the front. And it also, I find, seems to hold the hair a little better. The next piece of material which we're going to use is for the tail, which is just some red wool, and we'll tie a little piece on at the back. The body consists of two materials. The first that we're going to tie in is an oval tinsel. And I've got these spool keepers that Florin uses, but they don't work well for me because Florin puts a little magnet on these things that you can connect on your vise. Now, I can't do that because my vise is non-magnetic. So they just flop around. So I'll be pulling bits of material off of these spools. The other thing is tinsel, fat tinsel. This is a tinsel that is two colors. It's synthetic. It's plastic. So it's got a gold side and a silver side. So you have to be careful how you tie it on so that when your first wrap goes, it turns its silver side out. And then the hair is a combination of bucktail and bear hair. So the bucktail is you can buy them in pieces that have white and brown on them, white and brown, or you can buy them in pieces that are just white, short pieces that are just white. The first one that will go on will be the white one, and that sort of matches up with the body of the fly. They give it a little the belly of a minnow, and then the brown. I can select it off of here, or if you have a full bucktail, which is what this is, you can select the material off of the full bucktail for the brown and the white. And the other thing I have here is a piece of black bear hair, and I'm going to use that for the contrasting portion. You could probably get some dyed bucktail if you didn't have black bear hair. Oh, and this is a short bear hair. The other pieces I have very long bear hair. They're too long to use for this pattern. Okay, so from here we'll start with attaching thread. And as usual, I'm going to start at the front, do a few wraps to close up that little gap where the eye is bent around. A lot of people don't realize that if you're using really fine tippets, sometimes it can get caught in that gap and it'll break off on you. So I always try to make sure that I close up that gap either at the beginning or at the end of the fly. Then I'm just going to wrap down the shank of the hook to ensure that any material we tie on from here on in is going to adhere to the shank. Then I'm just going to go back up and try to do a nice smooth thread underbody. And stop shy of the eye when I do that. This just helps the tinsel lay a little flatter on the hook. And it keeps the tinsel from sliding around on the hook shank when you're wrapping it. And when I get back to the point of the hook, I'm going to get my little piece of wool, and I will measure sort of a little longer than the gap of the hook width behind where the barb is. And I'll start by tying that in right where the barb is, sticking out about hook gap width behind. And I will do just a couple of quick wraps. And that's a little pinch wrap. I don't know if you guys use pinch wraps a lot, but I find them useful for pulling your finger up in between, the thread up in between your fingers and then pulling down. And that tends to more precisely locate where that wrap goes. Come in and snip this off at a bit of an angle. Don't want a great big bump where I've tied that in. And I'll just take those fibers and slide them up the hook a bit and then wrap down over top of them. So I don't end up with a great big bump where I've tied the tinsel, where I've tied the red in, where it's going to show when I start tying tinsel and stuff on. Okay, bring my thread back up to, again, about 3 or 4 eye widths behind the front. Take my oval tinsel. I'm going to, because I don't have that magnet thing, I have to do this the hard way. So I'm going to snip off a piece of oval tinsel from the spool. And once again, about head, how big the head I want to leave about 3/8 of an inch there. And I'm going to tie the tinsel in there. And I tie it right on top of the hook. And wrap down the thing, keeping the oval tinsel on top of the hook for the time being. And then when I get all the way down to where that red tag is tied in, I'll pull it off to the far side of the hook slightly and tie it right down to where that tail starts. Again, back up the hook shank, trying not to create any big bumps or anything where I've tied stuff in, so I have a nice smooth body. The thinner the body tinsel you use, the more important it is to get a nice smooth body. Okay. And we'll take our flat tinsel, and I've used, this is number 12. You could probably get by with a little wider tinsel, but it's spool. Now this one I'm going to start right at the back. Doesn't create a lot of bulk. And again, there's 2 colors. There's on the back side it's gold, and on the front side it's silver. Now to do this properly, the first wrap is going to flip the tinsel over. So when I tie it on, I'll tie a little point here, snip a little point, and I'll tie it on with the gold side facing me, and I'll tie it on just on the top of the hook and wrap back to where the oval tinsel is. And now I'll bring my thread all the way forward again. When I get to the front, I'll throw a half hitch in front and bring my bobbin rest up and park my bobbin on the rest. Get my little hackle pliers, and I'm going to grab this tinsel at the very end with my hackle pliers. And then I'm going to wrap it around the first wrap around the back of the hook. And what I want to do when I do this is I want to make sure that the gold side of that tinsel goes in. And I'll just make sure that's in the right spot. And now I can use the rotary feature on my vise to wrap all the way up in touching turns, all the way up the shank of the fly. I need to grab that a little further down. So trying to keep it nice and smooth. Should have cut a little longer piece of tinsel, I think. That's the advantage of if you can actually use your bobbin keeper. You don't have to do the play around with. Wouldn't you know? Okay, I need to get. That's why you got to keep the tension on. Okay, let's try again. Trying not to leave a black line in between the tinsel wraps as I go up. Get that a little short. Okay, so now I am leaving a fair bit of gap between where I end the tinsel and or end the tinsel and start the head, because the head takes up a bit of room. All right. There we go. Should have been a little more generous with the piece of tinsel that I had off there. Okay. Once again, I'll come up here and do a half hitch. And that will just keep everything from coming unraveled when I start the next one. Okay, hang the bobbin again. And I'll grab the oval tinsel with my hackle pliers and do the same thing. Let's spiral that. Now, some people counter wrap, but I don't think it matters, quite frankly, which way that oval tinsel goes up the shank of the hook. It's just add a little contrast to the shiny body. Get to the front, pull them up, and my bobbin's a little loose. That's the beauty of these right bobbins. You can actually adjust the tension fairly easily uh, by just clicking the tension on it. There we go. Okay, there we are. Now comes the noisy part. Noisy because I'm going to use my hair stacker to even up the hair that I'm going to attach on the front of the hook. So the first batch of hair are going to go sort of halfway between the eye and where the tinsel ends, maybe a little closer to where the tinsel ends. And the first batch of hair I'm going to put in is white. What I'm going to find is see if I can find those are all kind of curved at the end. So I'm going to find a piece of bucktail that's got some white hair. Here we go. This one's good. It's got white hair, a fair amount. And I'm going to come in and take just the white ones. I'll take maybe a gap with the hair, maybe a little less than that, and cut it off right at the base. Now, we want to even the hair up. So I'm going to take the loose stuff out the bottom, hold it by the tip, and I got a little comb here. I will comb out the fuzzies as best I can. Looks a little bit sparse, so I'm going to add just another little bit of white. You can actually do this if you're careful. You can get a couple of different batches of hair, small batches, till you get the kind of width of amount of hair that you want. And don't worry about lining the tips up right now because the hair stacker is for that. So I get them, lay them down on the bench, and I've got that's a better batch of hair. Pull out the really long ones a bit, so it's easier to work with. Then I'm going to put these in the hair stacker. And then I'm going to make a bunch of noise by whacking this down on the. Yeah, that didn't work. Let's try again. It popped out of the hair stacker. That's more like it. Now I got the right size of here. Take the fuzzies out of the bottom with my comb. The extra long ones out. Put them in the hair stacker. That's better. Now I can. And now I can pull them out, and the ends are relatively even now. I need to measure where I'm going to tie these in, and I want the ends of the hair to be just back of where the red is. And for that, I'm going to pinch where my thread is currently hanging. And I will come up and I will take my scissors and cut just about 1/8 of an inch in front of where my fingers have pinched that hair. So when I go to tie this in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it so that I hold it up at an angle at the back, and where my thread is just a little bit in front of where the tinsel is. Now lay down the hair at an angle like that. Do a pinch wrap down to the front, and then wrap back, and then hold the hair up while I wrap back towards the tinsel. You see that creates a little bit of an angled ramp. When I get to the back, One of the things I'm going to do right at the back is I'm going to lift the hair up, do a wrap in behind, down the far side, bring it up in front, and I'll do that one more time. In behind, pull forward, and wrap in front. What that does is that stands the hair up at that nice angle. Then I'm going to cinch down the white hair. And the next batch of hair is going to go just a little bit in front of the previous wrap. So now I need the black hair from the bear hair batch. So I'll take a batch of bear hair off of this patch that is a little darker, and this is fairly short hair, so I'm going to be trying to get right down to the bottom of the patch. I'll take off a bigger batch than I usually need because I'm going to have to thin it down. Hold it at the end like I did the other ones, and use the comb to pull the short fuzzies out. And any extra long ones that stick out. And that probably is just a little bit too much. So I'm going to pull some of the really long ones out again. Trying to get the general amount of hair the same as the white. Back in the hair stacker and tap it down a bit and make some more noise. There's my black patch. Once again, I'll measure this one. I want the back of the fly to be almost vertical. So I'm going to measure that batch of hair slightly longer than the white. Hold it up in my fingers, bunch it up, make sure it's the length I want. And I will do the same thing as I've done before. I'm going to measure about a quarter inch in front of my fingers and trim square across. Once again, hold it at that angle so that the front hairs are just behind the eye. Bring my thread back and tie down from the top. Pinch wrap, pinch it down, and then tie right down towards the front of the fly, towards the eye of the fly. Now this bear hair is quite a bit spikier, so I have to spend some time tying down the spiky parts here. Okay. And I've got a few bits extending, so I'm just going to trim them off. They'll get in the way otherwise. This is going to make it easier to tie a head if I get these little spiky bits out of the way. And a little bit of white ones that stick out the front. There we go. So now I've got the white with the black in the middle. Bring my thread back to where I've got it tied in. And that's going to stand up really nice. Now I'm going to find the brown hair. And I've got a batch of that stuff here. I'll pull off a chunk. Trim it right down as far as I can get to the skin. So working with deer hair can be a little bit frustrating at times. Because it sticks out all over the place. I'm gonna pull those really long ones out. Again, get my comb and comb the fuzzies out at the bottom. Stick them in a stacker. Make some noise. That did not go well. That did not go well. Let me try again. This is a problem working with deer hair. It's always a bit of an experiment when you're dealing with small scraps of hair. There we go. That's more like it. Okay. Gotta get the short ones out or they won't stack. There we go. Down into the stacker. Making noise. That's what I get. Just going to get rid of a few strays out the bottom here. Measure where I want, how long I want it. Get down here and hold it there. And then come with my scissors and cut straight across again. Pretty good batch. Again, put it down at that angle. Make that first wrap, second wrap, and then wrap the butts right down to the eye of the hook. I'm going to wrap back far enough to create a good size black head. That's black nose. Dace has to have a black nose. And cover that all up. And so you end up with a big black nose on this thing that's kind of tapered. There we go. Just pull back from the eye any little stragglers and wrap back the stragglers back a bit to make sure you've got a nice smooth black head. And then whip finish. And I want to make sure I've got a good solid whip finish on there. And trim off the lid. So there's our white, black, brown wing on this thing. And I'm going to take head cement. There's a little bit of brown sticking out the front. I'm not sure about that just yet. And then we'll put some head cement on. Some guys use UV glue for this. I want this to be regular glue so that it penetrates the threads to bind that hair in really well. I don't know that UV glue does that particularly well.
UV glue sits on top.
Yeah, doesn't go down inside.
Yeah.
So that's that. And then to make sure that the eye is clear, I take my bodkin and I just make it go into the eye and clear that out. So there we go. That's the black-nosed dace.
That's a pretty old style.
It is. So I move spotlight, and we're back in business. So it's a good old style fly. The Mickey fin used the same basic techniques. And these make pretty good wet flies for bass and for just about anything else, I think.
Yeah, I used them a lot on largemouth when I lived down south.
Yeah, they create a disturbance in the water. They create some bulk as it goes by. So they work. That's all that counts. All right. So Florin is going to be up next. Now, let me just make sure I've got. Okay. Good.
Dave, Dennis here. You still there?
Yep.
Dave, I was told that you might have some fly tying tools available. Do you have a vise or anything like that? I got a beginner fly tyer who needs to be set up.
Okay. The only ones I got are belong to the Golden Rods and Reels, and they're the old kits that come in a little cardboard box, and it's got a fairly basic vise and a whip finisher and a few other things.
Are they available for a fundraiser?
Beg pardon?
Are they available for a fundraiser?
No, they belong to the club. I don't know what the club. I've just had them in storage. It used to be when we were doing some time.
Yeah, I understand.
I thought we'd sold off all the clubs once.
No, I've got 4 or 5 of them. In total, I've got 7 vices. One of them is my own, that are extra to what I normally use. And
Well, I would suggest that we talk to Mike and just. I mean, there's no point in them sitting doing nothing if it encourages a new fly tyer. Why not?
yeah,
I mean, for some sort of token donation.
because they belong to the Golden Rods, and
Okay.
they were from the days when we were over at the
students, the kids, yeah.
yeah, well, when we used to meet over at by the hospital there, we would have the on time session after, right?
Yeah.
And they were available for that purpose as well. And I've used them when we go to the outdoor show. So I usually take a couple of them with me when we go to the outdoor show, so that if we have somebody comes by wants to sit down and tie, we have a kit or two.
Okay.
In total, I've got 4, 5, 6, I think, that belong to the club.
Okay, I won't hold you up anymore. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Florin, you're in business.
Thank you, Dave. Oh, 2 more simple flies on the bass theme. So this one is called a yellow-bellied bullybugger, and the recipe says yellow for the marabou tail, but the picture looks chartreuse to my eyes, so I went with what the picture showed. So some of these flies you find in books, sometimes the written description doesn't quite match with the fly that they show you. So plus I have this habit of replacing materials quite often, so don't hold me to a recipe too tightly, because it's a lot of these recipes are rather inspirational, especially with things like woolly buggers, where you do have a fair amount of leeway. Anyway, so this is tied. Sizes here are 6 1/8. The particular hook that I have in the vise right now is a size 8 9671 Mustad from, I believe, way back when, so it may not match today's sizes. But anyway, red thread. And I like to go with finer. I know this is a pretty big fly, and you could get away with using a 6/0 thread. But I've gotten into the habit of tying even larger flies with the 8/0 thread, because if I have more materials or more steps or whatever, it's more forgiving of extra turns of thread. I'm not very good at being very economical with the turns of thread. So I have here some chartreuse marabou. So I'm going to pull some fibers off. Clump that feels to me like this. This gets pretty skinny in use, so I probably need a little bit more here so that it's not under feathered. And I'm not trying to line up these tips very much, just roughly speaking. Okay, so let's say this is satisfactory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim all this extra stuff and measure again. And that looks good enough. And I leave myself a little bit going along the shank of the hook so that I don't end up with a very uneven base for the rest of the fly. So there we go. Wrap backwards here to bring the thread to just above where the point of the barb of the hook used to be before crushing it. And then go and do a couple of turns underneath this tail. Just lift it up a little bit. Okay. Now this wasn't called for in the recipe, but usually woolly buggers like to have a bit of flash in their tails. So what I'm going to do is I have a little bit of, I found a remnant of flashy material. So this looks like a narrow kind of flashaboo, but it's fairly substantial. It's not super limp, and it's quite a bit of brightness to it. So I'm just going to put a little piece on one side and another piece on the other side and just leave it at that. I'll turn the fly around, lay this down so that it's nicely on the side and not on top or on the bottom, and hopefully it'll stay there. So now just wrap backwards to the same point where I ended up with the tail. And then the next thing is to trim this to the size of whatever I have on the other side, which is now almost invisible. Probably about here, I'd say. Okay, so now I have a little bit of, just a hint of flash there, really. Okay, then I'm going to tie this with reverse wrapping the hackle. So I want a wire rib that's going to secure my hackle in place, and I'm going to tie this one on next. So I take my wire, I measure a little bit up the hook shank so that the wire gets overwrapped for a fair distance here. And this is the magic device that Dave's been mentioning earlier. See the magnet here? And this is a magnetic fish. So the bobbin sticks. And then some yellow chenille. And again, I'm going to start it up a bit further up front, wrap over it backwards, and bring it to where I want the body to start, and then move my thread forward. And then just pull a bit of length of thread, let the bobbin hang down. I can still use my rotary vise, no problem. Now I want to untwist a little bit this so the body comes out a little bit nicer. And start wrapping the chenille, closely touching turns. There we go. Up to the front. And then secure the turns of thread over the chenille. And then another few turns in front from the chenille. And now get some hackle. Now I have some official woolly bugger hackle here. That's grizzly dyed red. You can use whatever you have. I do have Indian Cape that's dyed red. You can use that as well. I'm just using this because I've already used part of this feather, and this is a perfect size remnant, I think, for what I need to do here. So I'll secure this nicely. And again, pull the thread down, and then don't really need hackle pliers, but it feels to me like I get better control if I use hackle pliers, so I'm going to use hackle pliers. Okay, and now I'm going to again use my rotary vise, angle the hackle backwards, and spiral nicely over the chenille. Try to get the turns as even as I can. I reach the end here, take my wire, and I pull it over the hackle, and I do a couple of tight turns here with the wire to make sure that the hackle is properly secured. And then I'm just going to leave it there for now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start wrapping the wire forward. And while I'm doing this, I'm just going to keep wiggling it so that the wire goes in between the hackle fibers and at a nice angle cutting across the hackle. So this is going to provide a very secure hackle. So even if your hackle stem were to break somewhere along the way because you're catching too many fish, right? Nice problems, right? Then the wire is going to still hold it in place. And making this look more complicated than it has to be, you just kind of, take a deep breath and then plunge and wrap your wire over the hackle, and it's all going to come out okay. Don't worry too much about it. You can make this worse by overthinking it. Okay, and then because this is fairly thick wire, I'm going to need, and this is only 8/0 thread, I'm going to need, it's probably even thinner than 8/0. There's some old Beneki thread that I'm using here, actually. Just helicopter the wire and build a little bit of a head, which consists mainly in just overwrapping the materials that you have uncovered here at the front of the fly, just behind the eye. I always like to give the bobbin a little bit of a spin to untwist the thread before I do the whip finish, because that provides me with a little bit flatter lying thread and a neater whip finish. Not a very big deal with fine thread, but it's quite visible if you use 6/0 thread or thicker. And then trim, and then go back here. Disentangle see, I let it go. Now it's all tangled up with the marabou. Normally at this point, if you just grab the hackle, you should be able to break it off, or just use your scissors and trim it off. Okay, and then make this, better than perfect, which it already is, obviously. And just take a little bit of head cement. Now, when you do this, keep bearing in mind that better is the enemy of good. So don't overdo it. And a bit of head cement, okay. The eye of the hook is still clean. Looks good. And that's that. This is a fly that should work for anything that's interested in biting on something that's colorful and moves through the water.
It might be good on salmon.
Thinking that, as I was tying these things, is like, this is a heavy hook. Chum like this, some of the colors in here. So
Yeah, I think it'd be natural for them, chums and kings.
So anyway, there you go. So there's this one. So it's just another woolly bugger. It's just a different choice of colors and whatnot. Now the second fly, again, I mostly tied by the picture because the instructions were, the materials, whatever, it's just specified some soft feathers. So this one is a slightly bigger hook. It's a size 6. And I'm going to use some dumbbell eyes. And I'm going to switch thread color to olive according to the recipe, although I think whatever you have at hand is going to work just as well. So here you can see what Dave was talking about earlier, where there's a little bit of a gap here at the eye of the hook. It's actually quite visible under magnification. So, chances are you're not going to be fishing this fly with, very fine tippets. They're gonna run through there, but I'm just gonna close this up a bit. Okay, so I'm going to make a little bump of thread here, and this little bump of thread is also going to help me tie on the eyes. So it's always useful to tie on the dumbbell eyes behind a little bump of thread, which then when you tighten the thread, gives it something to grip against and hold your dumbbell eyes properly in place. So there we go. One wrap across one side, and then immediately switch side and go, whoops. The first couple of threads is not very solid in place. Oh, there you go. Switch again. I want to give it a little bit of even tension from both sides. That's kind of the idea. So that the eyes get secured in place properly. And then I build this up a little bit. Till I'm happy enough. Okay. Now, if you don't do the first turns of thread sufficiently tight, it doesn't matter how much thread buildup you have on here. It's not going to hold your eyes. They're still going to wobble, extra thread and all. So it won't help. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the tail. And what I'm going to use here is this material, which is labeled Grizzly Soft Hackle Hot Orange. So what it is just soft chicken feathers dyed orange. And they're kind of nice because I think they're somewhere between, you know, the turkey marabou, which is extremely soft, and standard soft hackle, which is usually the neck. So these are more body, and if you have back feathers, you know, like a hen back rather than a hen neck would give you something closer to this degree of fluffiness. So what I'm going to do is, because I think it looks nicer, I took 2 of these feathers and I found them with matching tips. So I'm going to separate here a little piece that looks appropriate for me for a tail and pull some of the fibers back and attach these 2 on the hook where the tail goes on. And try to do this without trapping too many fibers in the process, and make sure that these things are laid down symmetric and on top of the hook, which looks like it's pretty close. And once you have those in place, then wet your fingertips a little bit. So little cup here with a bit of water in it comes in handy when you're tying with this sorts of materials. I'm going to push this all back here. Eventually, I want to fold some of this hackle. Right now, all I want is just push the stuff out of the way a little bit. And if I get it a little moist, that's going to be facilitated a fair bit. So I need to move my thread forward and out of this mess. Okay, bring this forward. And then I've got my 2 feathers. Now I twisted one of them so they're both laid on top of each other. So when I put the tails in, I had them, the inside faces pressed together. And now what I'm doing is I have them laid on top of each other with both of the outside part of the feather facing forward. It's just standard wet fly hackling technique that I'm doing here. Nothing fancy really. Okay, and just keep stroking this back so that it looks okay. You don't have to do it this complicated. You can take 1 feather at a time and just wrap it on. But because I started with 2 feathers, I'm thinking, okay, well, let's just kind of keep going that way until I have one of the feathers a bit shorter, but it's going to run out eventually. Maybe a bit more moisture is going to help. Okay, keep holding the hackle back. Doesn't look very pretty now because the hackle got wet. But okay, so now I think I'm at the point where one of the feathers ought to be tied off. So I'm going to do a bit of an intermediate tie off here. So just run the thread through, do 3 times, and remove the one feather that's done. Okay, and then continue. So move again, move the thread forward and continue wrapping. You can do this sequentially, you know, one feather at a time, finish that feather off, tie another one on and continue, you know, same idea. So again, fold this back. This extra fuzz here I don't need. I think with this, I've got enough of this cheekaboo stuff. Then I tie over this. I can probably get another turn. Yeah, why not? Whoops. Why not? Is because now the stem got a little bit thick and it can be a bit too much. Okay, I'll tie over this. Again, this is fairly thick feather stem at this point, so I'm just going to go in there and secure it properly, and then use my not so good scissors to cut the thick stuff here. All right. And now for the finishing touch, so of course, clean up. And sometimes using tweezers here is the right thing to do. Okay, so for the final touch, I'm going to use some dyed orange to match the cheekaboo, just guinea feathers. So let's find something that's not too small, because this is a big fly. Looking for a suitable feather, and all I can find are little things. Nah, I want bigger than that. Oh, there it is. This one looks okay. So here's something with decent size fibers. And what I do is I just go to the tip of the feather, like so, and pull my fibers back. That's good enough. I'll pull back. And then when I tie it on, I just tie it on in front of the other guys. Just a soft loop here. Cinch it down. And notice that I left myself, I didn't tie it on exactly at the point where I separated the fibers, but a little bit further from that, so I have room to position the feather properly when I do the wrapping. So then trim. And now I want this also properly folded, so I'm going to wet my fingers again and then get a little bit of folding on this feather as well. So as you know, the stem sometimes has a tendency to twist. So you just keep stroking back those fibers and ensure that your stem is nicely the plane. So what you want to achieve is that the plane in which the stem and the fibers normally are is perpendicular to the shank of the hook. That's a little finishing touch here. And just don't catch fibers because then you end up with these fibers being pushed forward and it just makes everything look ugly. Well, uglier than it already is. This is not designed to be a pretty fly. Just Google-eyed monster. Which in fact, the dragons, no, there are no orange dragonflies out there. But this is called a shaggy dragon. They are monsters. Sorry?
This would work, I think. I like it.
Yeah, it kind of has a yummy look to it from a fishing point of view. So yeah, I think I'm looking forward to having access to the boat again and being able to go out and doing some field research.
Yeah, I like it.
So again, untwist the thread. Do my customary 2 whip finishes here in front of the eyes. Probably a bit of flash wouldn't be a bad idea. One could put a couple of strands of flash between finishing off with the chickaboo and adding the guinea feather. So, you know, a couple of strands of flash there might work as well. It just makes the fly more complicated, which kind of defeats the purpose in a way. This is meant to be a simple fly, although I took a lot longer to do it than the woolly bugger. But yeah, so that's fly number 2, and
Yeah, that's a good fly.
I like that.
end of the show.
I definitely like the look of that one.
Yeah, it does look nice that